Okay, we are now recording. We're now live, so everything from here on will be part of the archive. So to repeat myself, I'm Toph Eklund, and my guest today is Jack King Spooner, uh, the developer of, among other games, uh, Beeswing and Dujanah. Uh, Jack, if
Hi
you
there.
yes, can you hear me?
Hi, yes. Yeah, thanks for having me.
And Jack, if you want, I can, since I know you're connected audio only, that's what we were able to make work before. I can
Hmm.
pull up and show people I can include the Dujanah trailer. I can enable screen sharing on my computer, and we can show the Dujanah Kickstarter trailer as we get started. I think everyone who's here has probably already seen it, but it might be useful for people viewing the archive later. Should we go ahead and do that?
Um,
Or do you just want us to,
okay.
okay,
Well, we can just get cracking on with things.
let's look.
Why?
Yeah, because I can always direct people. I can always include a link. I can include a link along with the archive. So,
I don't
uh,
want to bore people with it.
so
Okay.
what shall we start? Let's start. Before, rather than starting directly with Dujana, let's start with kind of your kind of. We talked about this a little bit, you and I, before. Your path into game design, indie game design and development. So,
Hmm.
how did you decide? Well, kind of share a bit of your background and how you decided to start making games.
Yeah, well, so I came from well, I started off studying English literature and philosophy, and the way universities work here, you can minor in things, then take that up as your major later along. And so I ended up actually majoring in fine art with sound practices as my kind of thing. And from there, I was really interested in how to best express an idea. So, is the painting the best way to express an idea about, I don't know, about motion? Perhaps not, but perhaps it is. It depends what you're trying to say. Anyway, wanted to um, I wanted to make a piece about, well, one of my recurring themes is the kind of border between tackiness and sincerity. So I wanted to do a more narrative driven piece, and I was thinking, what's the best medium to do this? I was looking at short film or short film collections. I did a little interview project, but yeah, none of these had this idea of a fractured narrative, which I was really looking for. And so it dawned on me something like a video game has this kind of fractured narrative where you're kind of left to your own means to find the stories whenever you come in whatever order they come to you. And so I started kind of looking into making a video game, and yeah, uh, I bought RPG Maker for a couple of quid, and then won a competition with the game I made, and got a more expensive version of RPG Maker. Won another competition with like a little jam thing, and then got a copy of Game Maker. Then got a copy of Construct 2, I think it's called, and just yeah, from that £2 RPG Maker, managed to kind of get to where I am now from just making these little narrative things.
I think that's a good starting point. Okay, so in
A
wanting
bit
to
of a
make, well,
rambling answer, sorry.
no, I like this. I like this because um, there is this idea that is, I think, partially true and but also false in some really important ways, that you can tell any kind of story in any kind of medium.
Mm-hmm.
And it's on one level, it is on on the most basic level, it is absolutely true. On the other hand, the format of the medium affects the storytelling. And
Mm-hmm.
in games, this has often been taken as a reason why. Don't get me wrong. I play games that use violence as a primary game mechanic. I've played and enjoyed games that were shooting games and fighting games, but why games will be inevitably primarily driven by combat or else perhaps by racing or sports mechanics. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but what you found as you were looking for a medium that would allow you to tell kind of fractured and nonlinear stories is that the interactivity of games was a great way to tell a nonlinear story, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, I think the non-linearity comes before the interactivity with me. Um,
well, and I feel like that for in a, shall we say, postmodern or post-structuralist world, feel free, those of you who are listening now or later, to look those terms up. What they mean depends in part on who's using the words, but um, that there's something about games that really suits the kind of fragmented and fractured world we live in now. Um, Even as a lot of games still have highly linear stories. Uh,
mm.
what are some of your inspirations in terms of the kind of storytelling you wanted to do? And feel free if you want to, bring in any of your earlier games as examples. There were kind of touchstones, whether it's Will You Ever Return or Sluggish Moors, in terms of, you know,
Mm.
of kind of where you were going with that. Games and movies and books and writers and all that kind of inspired you in your journey.
Mm. Well, I think my inspirations lie more in visual art
Mm-hmm.
and literature than the movies and games.
Okay.
The the biggest inspiration uh, probably comes from American writers, from beatniks collectively, how they look at form and in writing, from from Kerouac just kind of putting it all on the page to Burroughs really, from cut up technique to
Mm-hmm.
ideas of disgust, and then even Snyder and Ginsberg with their endless kind of editing and re-editing. I not that any of their techniques I'm particularly sold on or following that.
Mm-hmm.
I just like they were looking at the form of the medium, and so from that inspiration and other narrative directions, perhaps more, for lack of a better term, postmodern writers like
Mm-hmm.
Franzen, um, David Foster Wallace, and Don DeLillo.
Right.
I would encourage anyone to read, everyone and anyone to read Don DeLillo. He's just a fantastic writer.
I had
And
actually
then
come to conclude. Go ahead, Jack. Go ahead. I was just kind of about to interrupt with something that was just not terribly relevant. So please continue.
and then in terms of
Go ahead.
in terms of visual art, Mike Kelly and Paul McCarthy
Okay.
are big influences. In their kind of lack of reverence towards towards the media. And
So, some of your stuff
expressing
actually made me think of Francis Bacon. Not the Elizabethan philosopher, but the 20th century artist. Are you familiar with Bacon?
Okay. Oh yeah, sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, nice. Screaming priests in that.
Yeah.
I think he has a similar kind of disdain to Polish Catholics that I do. Um, all right, yeah, it's a very. Oh, there's another one, a Scottish writer who's on the tip of my tongue, but I just can't quite think of her name. Um, yeah, yeah. So I mean, I'm sure these influences aren't very apparent in my work when you leave my stuff. People are going to be like, "Oh, Don DeLillo inspired game," and then play it and be like, what is this rot? But I'm coming from this is maybe a launching point for me.
I'm trying to think. I feel like I should know. Well, if I'm being reasonably familiar with postmodern literature, I feel like I should have some idea who the Scottish writer you're talking about is, but I'm not. She's not coming to my mind. Her name isn't coming to me anyway. Um, so I mean, I see, among other things, some distinctly kind of of postmodern themes in your game. Certainly, they loop around and touch on uh, elements of Christian and Buddhist and obviously in Dujanah kind of Muslim theology and kind of as to use your own since you use the word, I'll go ahead and use it as well, eschatology, which is kind of end times or end of the world, and the kind of intersections of the more philosophical aspects and the more kind of supernatural aspects of religion in a way that it seems to cover kind of this broad expanse from the kind of satirical hell of Will You Ever Return to some much more meditative explorations in your recent work. Uh,
Mm.
what what kind of or, or philosophical perspectives or for that matter ideas about not necessarily about any particular religion, but about like including some of these ideas and values in your work. What motivates you to touch on these issues? Is it an issue of representation, wanting to see more, an issue of how schools of thought have impacted you? Feel
Mm.
free to take that question anywhere you find productive.
Mm. I think there's a couple of limbs here. Sure, on the idea of representation is an aspect, but probably less so than uh, than the other aspects.
Okay.
I think okay, I'm probably not the right type of person to be um, the preferred the wonderful state would be if queer people of color, females even, God, if that's the case, the situation, it would be great if there was more representation in games. But as it stands, teams are continuously plowing down the same trough, and white uh, American army dudes narratives. So maybe I can make a step in the right direction, and people will see the where I mess up and be able to kind of take it even further in the right direction, in the true right direction. But yeah, representation isn't so much of a big thing for me, in as much as understanding is the bigger deal. So it comes from a place where I want to gain an understanding. I want to share that understanding, not with kind of maybe not share answers, but share questions which I come across, and I usually look for more later, more meditative things, looking for more kind of universal questions as opposed to um, personal questions. So yeah, there was another prong to that. So understanding, I've even probably forgotten the question.
Oh, just presenting you one.
Oh, and yeah, and I'm absolutely fascinated with um, moral philosophy. That's kind of why my games are so often burdened with ramblings. So yeah, uh, understanding, personal interest, and to a lesser extent representation. Yeah, the, I think that's what it boils down to.
Oh, and on the issue of understanding and also of representation, the way I've heard it put, and I think this is very true, is that it is creating works that are outside your own personal experience is actually potentially a very valuable thing. It also involves, hopefully, if it's done right, a willingness to take criticism when you're writing about people whose lives are different than your own, and that it is much better to, to stretch your boundaries and then take criticism for where you have perhaps fallen short. I'm not saying any
Oh
specific
no,
things. Then to just
well,
basically keep
be
keep creating the same stories over and over again with the same people. Sorry, go ahead, Jack.
I mean, it'd be surprising if I didn't trip up here and there. So
It's to be
uh,
expected. We're all
it,
human.
it's to be expected, exactly. And yeah, I could probably make my whole body of work about life in rural Scotland, but you know,
Well, let's talk about that.
might
Let's
get a
talk
bit
about that a little
tired.
bit. Let's talk about that a little bit because your kind of biggest game prior to this was Beeswing, which you successfully kickstarted, and it is about your own life in rural Scotland. And I've having played it and seeing something people have said about it, comparing it to other things to Earthbound, just without
Mhm.
combat. Uh, let's take a look at that story just for a minute in that game. Um, why'd you decide? You said that some of your first work was done in Game Maker. Excuse me, in RPG Maker. Um, what was it about the way that the kind of bits of all these different life stories that come together as they intersect with your kind of the player's the player's avatar, which is supposed to be you in Beeswing, pretty much,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, I mean
It's fictionalized.
his character. Yeah, his character. Um, a character. It's not exactly me. Um, yeah. Sorry, what was the question?
Oh, sorry. Basically, how did you develop the mechanics, the game mechanics for Beeswing? Where'd those come from?
Mm-hmm. I mean, just completely influenced by um, the kind of village sections in Zelda games and Pokemon games. You know, where you bump into someone and they have a phrase and that's their entire character, and kind of going with that. How did I develop the mechanics? The game's made in. I mean, technically, are you asking?
I'm okay. Feel free to get as technical as you want to. I'm thinking kind of high level, like about you know, kind of the way that RPG village mechanics work, and that uh, um,
Okay, so
And the way that turns into this story that is about the fact that these are not people who have one sentence lives, right?
hmm,
It's not, I don't trust the bandits in the mountains, and then that's all you ever hear from that person. And I've seen this done
hmm,
in a few other projects. I can only think of indie projects that have done this. Um, uh, but that use that kind of format. And here it's not just the format, because this is rural Scotland. It's not it's not fantasy village with a castle in the middle of it.
hmm, yeah. Um, I mean, a lot of my neighbors growing up, they were in a very real sense, just a one-line character.
Okay, yeah,
Marilyn
okay.
Hughes, Marilyn Hughes walking the dog, and you would walk past her, and she would say, "Oh, it's fine weather for ducks," and that's all my living memory of Marilyn Hughes is. Oh, and her
Okay,
name.
okay, I get it.
Uh, but yeah. So I mean, if you, it's not a representation of. I mean, it's not going for a representation of village life. There isn't. It's kind of a weird a weird atmosphere which is going on where you brush past people and they immediately tell you their life story.
Hmm.
So it's a weird kind of um, it's a weird kind of memoir sort of thing. Well, not memoir, document, personal document more than anything. And the RPG kind of village mechanics work well in that because you can do things. For example, there's a house which you can't go inside. I know the world is a really different place, but when I was growing up, all the houses on the terrace had their door open, and you would just pop your head in and say, "Hello, do you want some, you know, some apples or whatever?" I don't know. But then there was a house which always had their door locked, and I never knew who lived in there. So having the locked off house works for kind of representation. And you can also kind of subvert the idea of fetch and reward kind of best in the game as well. So yeah, a few different ways for how the RPG mechanics happened. Oh, what happened to my screen?
Well, okay. I'm not. You're still coming through. I got message that sometimes the archive doesn't. There can be problems with the archive. There's nothing visually to display. So I went ahead and popped up your itch.io page. So there's something for people to look at there. Um,
Okay, sure.
as long as it's still working on your end, this should help make sure that we don't have any problems exporting the archive to YouTube. Fingers, eyes, and elbows crossed.
Okay, cool. Okay, cool. Nice. Yeah, sorry. Just stop me if I'm being boring. I know
Oh,
that I
absolutely
kind of
not.
rambling. So what's the situation here? Have you got a class of people having to listen to me?
Well, basically, we've got people from several different classes who have chosen to be here, including I've got people who are in my class last month. Fulso has an unusual calendar schedule where people basically take one course at a time in intensives uh, that then they only take one course at a time, but courses normally last 1 month each. I know that's a very unusual kind of format. It's a non-traditional format. So people who are in my class last month, people who are in one of my classes this month, and people who are in other classes. I know some in the mobile gaming program, as well as some students from the creative writing program, and possibly some other people as well, because there are people here I know and there are people here that I don't know.
Okay, so it's not just you and me chatting. Okay.
and some
All
game
right. So,
design master's students as well. Um,
oh gosh. Well, please just stop me if I'm being boring.
oh,
If there's
not.
an audience. Um. Okay.
I'm going to go ahead and I heard some. I'm just muting other people here because I heard some keyboard clicking and uh, have a request for questions. So I think we can talk. I can always come back in with more things to kind of try and draw you out about Dujanah and other things. Why don't you just basically explain the concept? Just give a quick overview for anyone who of what Dujanah is, what you're trying to do with that game, and then we'll take some questions.
Hmm. Yeah. So I think it's perhaps one of my well, I personally feel it's my most interesting work to date. It's very, very similar in format to Beeswing. It's set in a rural community um, with with various kind of characters and their uh, light moral philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
um, but there's a difference where in that it's thematically an opposite to Beeswing.
Right.
Um, so so what I'm trying to do with this, there's yeah, as the project's gone on, the topics which were at first interesting and what I was seeking for a better understanding became more and more a hot topic with first some some terror attacks in France, and then we have currently in Europe we have a refugee, well,
Mm-hmm.
migrant crisis to be more honest with the situation. So from that, I really thought, it's time to get to work on a better understanding and to work on, you know, becoming more integrated with communities which I'm surrounded by. I mean, uh,
Mm-hmm.
a big uh, community in Edinburgh where I live is Pakistani and Turkish communities. I mean,
Right.
just everywhere, and I want to really to be you know familiar face. I don't want to. Anyway, well, of course, I have. Yeah. So the talking with people, which perhaps historically haven't had such perhaps maybe haven't had such a voice in the world. So talking to the uh, Muslim Women's Association of Edinburgh and Glasgow. Hopefully, should the funding be successful, you know, having interviews with them and talking about just day-to-day things, what what they would like to change about the tram system in Edinburgh, things like this. So there's so having nice conversations, and but yeah, I think maybe some assumptions are made about the ideas of of violence and religion and the correlations between the two. Uh, People immediately make understandably make assumptions about what I'm trying to do. And yeah, I would encourage people to perhaps wait, or they might be a bit disappointed that they're not going to be able to, I don't know, wage war on the Western world or something like this. So, and I guess another thing is I want to. I want to make steps in games, particularly, at dissolving this idea of the ideological other.
Mm-hmm.
The that the community in the game is very much a mirror of the community in anywhere. It's it's a human story uh, more than any specific religion story. I know, of course, it's not, as some media outputs have said, it's an Islamic State, or even saying it's an Islamic country uh, isn't right, because I mean I've been talking to during my research I've been talking to apostates who would
Uh-huh.
probably be called Muslims. I mean, if you look at even a country like Morocco, you have thousands of Jewish people living there.
Right.
I've not been talking to Jewish people, but I have been conversing with members of the Baha'i faith
Mm-hmm.
who were living. Well, he was formerly living in Iraq, so the relationship to violence might not be as insinuating. No, that's not the word. Uh, as problematic as some might assume. No, I'm trying to do quite a few things, and more than anything, I really want to make something which is engaging and uh, entertaining, but also dealing with things which are potentially quite difficult for people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, um, I mean, the difficulty being that there are no clear answers.
Right.
Um, I think that's something which I've looked at with all my games since. Well, not all my games, but a lot of my games. That there are no clear answers to grieving. There are no clear answers to I don't know, to lots of things. There's no clear answers to how to cope with aging or something like this, or you know, it's so difficult in this sort of sense, not difficult in any bigoted or political sense.
Right. Oh, I mean, you basically said that there's actually a strong continuity between Beeswing and Dujanah in that you're moving from one story of a rural community to another, and that there are these powerful connections in the world we live in which these communities that often people have not been able to see the similarities between or connections between, um, as harsh circumstances are causing some major movements of entire groups of people. Suddenly, the other isn't that person over there on that other continent. It's this actual specific person who now lives next door to you.
Well, but often people don't even correlate the two. They will say some uh, bigoted, borderline xenophobic thing, and then have a cup of coffee, or go to have thank their doctor who's from Pakistani origin or something for
Right.
helping them with prostate cancer or something like this. So people don't really correlate the two, how these things happen. Uh, yeah, and of course, anyone who's done anthropology will understand that there's no such thing in anthropological terms as the exotic.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, so yeah, borrowing perhaps from very kind of simple thing, simplistic thing. I mean, it's yeah.
Because
But I'm very excited by this work, I have to say. I mean, I would just be over the moon if I get funding for it because
Hmm.
I just think I, you know, from the conversations which I've had so far, they've just been utterly fascinating, and it would just be amazing if I could continue this work and that an actual, a game could come of it. I think it would really be something interesting. Anyway,
Well, I'm going to go ahead and open the floor to questions now because we've got some questions asked. And I got one thing I want to talk to you about or would be happy to ask you about, but I want to make sure people get a chance to ask you their questions. We've got
gosh, wow.
a wide range of people here. So if you have a question, go
This is
ahead.
absolutely fascinating. Thanks so much for this opportunity. I can't wait to answer some questions. Brilliant. This is,
So
yeah,
the first
great.
question coming out of the chat, if you have a question, please either feel free to post it to the chat or to raise your hand. Then I can let you actually ask, you know, on the in the audio recording. The first question comes from Martha Feldman. I'm curious about the arcade games you added. It is strange finding arcade games in a cave. Well, it's not okay. Well, it's not actually in a cave. There's a cave in the game, but uh, and having your character playing these games. What is your story around that? So, reason for the games and the story around the arcade games.
Mhm. So one of the things, hmm, I don't really want to lay all my cards on the table, but I
Right.
might as well. So the arcade isn't in the cave. They're separate places. I know it looks quite cavernous, but in my experience, they they were quite
Yeah.
arcades were quite cavernous. Um, yeah, maybe I should work on that. I mean, the moment it's just one background with different tints for all the interiors, so that might be causing confusion. But the arcade I've found has is really the thing for for what I want to do with the narrative. So the idea of where does this kind of yearning, especially in young men, for violence. Where does this come from? And
Okay.
this is a kind of idea of, um, yeah, I don't want to really be stapling down answers, but one narrative arc in the game is that you kind of you get fed this dream of becoming a hero, and uh, I think games really, almost all kind of action games go for this hero narrative. And so having the hero narrative in a game within uh, a story arc in the game, if that makes sense, it was quite exciting for me. And that, and on top of that was the 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 actions you have to uh, perform to fulfill this hero narrative is to play a game. I thought that was very exciting. And secondly, there's this kind of French idea of maison ambiente, which is a story within a story or a play within a play. In this
Hmm.
case, a game within a game, which allows you to do a few different things. I'm not sure at the moment how interesting they are. First and foremost, you can a story within a story can be, it can be um, a little kind of offshoot of the main narrative, which uh, gives meaning to the main narrative. So a separate story which also kind of works with the main narrative. So there's that idea. Um, Secondly, perhaps a bit less interestingly, you can by having a game within a game, you can comment on games. You can make comments. Well, the the NPC can say something like, "Well, wait, let me just pull up some text which potential NPC might say."
Okay.
Uh, let's see. Um, so a potential NPC playing the game might say, I had troubles reconciling the internet crude humor of the bosses with the stated frame of the Islamic mythology. It all feels muddled, and I'm not sure if it's, say, trying to lightly comment on themes of repression or state religion sponsored censorship, or the notion of a reward for destroying vague Western symbols. So if an NPC just says that with no reference to anything, it becomes it's removed from the world which I've created. So, but if they're saying that in reference to a game within the world, then they are still embodied within the world. At the same time, making a comment. I
Right.
have to reiterate. I'm not sure how interesting this rhetorical tool is. So,
Well, I find it quite interesting. We do have some more questions, so
okay,
um,
sure.
let's. Okay, next one comes from Sean Ferris. It says, looking at some of the animated screenshots, it seems the game has a very claymation feel to it, which reminds me of the Adam Jones videos that he has done for Tool, which can have a very powerful, just disjointing from reality feel to them. Is that a planned style effect throughout the game? For example, the screen cap of the girl in the house talking to her mom feels like it has a flat background compared to the clay feeling town. So I'm going to make sure people can actually see that screen here. There's the
Oh,
town,
right.
and then here. Wait, where did I
Uh,
go?
up,
There's the
up.
house. Um,
Hmm.
so that's the question is about the aesthetics of the claymation and hand
Sure.
drawn art, which is certainly a
Yeah.
technique you've used before.
Yeah. Fantastic. The point of reference was Adam Jones from the Tool videos, because I have to say honestly, massive. The Tool music videos were a real seminal part in my kind of visual arts thing. Uh, yeah, really seminal, especially the kind of ambiguity in their earlier ones. In fact, I saw Tool live, and I was just blown away by their. I mean, it was for their before they went into the more kind of computer generated stuff, the more kind of uh, eye trickery stuff, trompe l'oeil. Um,
Right.
blown away by their these strange, ambiguous moods they created with Adam Jones created with the visuals. So yeah, I mean, it is. A few people have noted that as a reference. Um, the reference goes a bit further back to the brothers Quay, who
Okay.
did
Yeah.
lots of uh, animation. So if the chap is interested in that kind of world, then the Quay brothers do some fantastic. I mean, their Alice in Wonderland animation is very dark, but just wonderful to watch.
I'll have to
Yeah,
I'll have to include some links when I put this up, including the Brothers Quay. Um, go
so,
ahead, Jack.
so I mean the the setting for the home is very flat. Um, but I wanted it to be uh, visually different to the other interiors. I wanted it to be a bit more ornamental and decorative, and I wanted in quite a a base way is more flat. You're talking with your mother, and you
Mhm.
kind of go into this relational psychology kind of situation of which everyone does when they talk to a parent figure of everything becomes a bit flat. So I wanted that kind of echoed visually. Um, Also, it was one of the earlier. Oh, if I'm going to be honest, so it was one of the earlier sketches which I did of how it's going to look, and it just kind of uh, I just like it. It's staying, and because it's different.
Yeah,
It's a
certainly
kind of
different
special
from,
place. It's her house. But you can see there's the sea scene,
right.
which is again quite flat, and there's another character there, which is going to be, well, hopefully, going to be quite important for the story as well. Um, or pivotal character, a recurring character, so they need a visually distinct, pardon me, place. Yeah, no, good. Okay, so I'm not sure if I answered that question or if it
I
was
think
just.
so. I actually have a kind of related follow up. Um, is maybe it only seems this way coming from the U.S., but it seems to me that there is quite a bit more claymation um, going on that gets done out of well, frankly, mainly the touchstone for Americans is Aardman Entertainment, right? Wallace and Gromit. Um, is there? Did you find that you had? Would you take courses on claymation, or or is this something that in kind of like the Brothers Quay and maybe also John Svankmajer? Is John Svankmajer an influence?
Yeah,
There's,
yeah, definitely.
uh,
Uh, I've never heard that second name pronounced out loud.
I think
How do
that's the correct
you
pronunciation.
or something?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's how someone else pronounced it, and I latched onto that as okay. I'm going to assume that I can call him that because yes, it's a very complex Czech name.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Oh god.
well, let's move on to the next question because Robin Coleman has an interesting one here, and Robin said, "Jack, do you feel a connection to other indie developers such as, uh, oh man, I'm going to mispronounce this guy's last name, Daniel Ben-Mergui? Oh, that's totally wrong. Jordan Mangason, Anna Anthropy, or Ryan Green in terms of the themes you've chosen to explore and the more isolated process you take to approach to the game development process? What led you to choose games as a medium?" I know Anna
Ah,
recommended your games before, so Anna Anthropy knows
did
who
she?
you are. Yeah.
Wow. Blimey. That I didn't know that.
I forget which one it was, but that was specifically called out on Anna Anthropy's blog. Yeah.
Huh. Blimey. I don't feel any kind of kinship with any of those mentioned. Just they're all North American, aren't they?
True. I think so. The
Uh,
ones I know of are
yeah, the
the ones
one,
that I know
yeah.
where they're from.
I mean,
Oh, okay.
that's
Robin
not.
just added that Daniel is actually Brazilian. So Daniel, whose last
I'm
name
not
I
quite sure.
completely
I'm not quite
butchered.
sure about. What game did Daniel make, Robin? Daniel. How do I pronounce the second name? I'll just
I
quickly have a look at him.
Well, yeah. I'm going to go ahead and Ben uh,
Okay.
Ben Mergui. So the Oh, I wish I were the moon. Of course, of course.
Okay. Um. So I think I feel more kind
I
of
love
in line.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. The kind
Oh
of
no.
comic book
Oh,
thing.
yep. Night Raveler. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Sorry for that little confusion. Yeah. I have quite most of my games were kind of I I was really encouraged by a freeware community on Game Jolt. Now Game Jolt is kind of in second place to perhaps other sites now, but
Argentina.
at the time the community was really supportive, and
Mhm.
uh, I found kind of a kinship with more with a developer called Jake Clover. Um, that's JakeClover, Jake Clover, and Stephen the Catamites.
Oh, the
Uh,
Catamites. Okay, yes. That's I remember thinking
he's a
that Space Funeral, the Catamites game in the Space Funeral series of games was reminded me a little bit of some of your stuff. Um,
I mean, yeah,
is that is that the real?
massive, massive,
It may not be the.
massive input for a lot of my work, and yeah, I, I've had lots of nice conversations. Cool guy. Um, yeah, so I mean, I'm not very. A lot of people just kind of. I'm not that interesting for most people, you know. So I don't really have any collaborations. I did a nice collaboration project with quite a few uh, interesting developers. If you look at my itch site, the stage is a
Right.
collaboration project. Well, I just said anyone want to collaborate, and people sent me little scripts. So you can see there's Robert Yang and there's uh, Anonymous, who I wonder if anyone will guess, and there's yeah different people. Um, oh, you're playing one, are you?
Oh, I probably
So
shouldn't interrupt what we're doing that way, but well,
might be a bit noisy. Okay, so here's Camille Singer here. Um, yeah, so I'm not sure if that answers the question at all, but I mean, there's just so
I'm
many
gonna go ahead and
fantastic creative
I'm gonna
people.
go ahead and mute that. Okay, there we go. Oh no, that answers it for me. And Robin clarified that Daniel Bergamui, Ben Mer, Ben Mergui, uh, is actually from Argentina. Um, and for anyone who,
I don't know. I just feel, yeah, I didn't mean anything by that. That they were North American. You know, forget I
well,
said that.
there are
Uh,
different kind of cultures in different contexts. Here's the Game Jolt page for the Catamites. Do you feel like itch.io offers some of that sense of community? I know they're trying to build community, but perhaps there's not the.
I'm not sure if either offer that sense of community anymore.
Okay,
I think
and
I
and
would
to,
encourage people to use Game Jolt forums if they want to have a sense of community. But there's a lot of well, younger people, 14-year-olds, and perhaps they're not having conversations which are conducive to any into your practice. But I think Take Source is always worthwhile. Putting stuff there, you can get some very valuable feedback.
mm-hmm.
I mean, you're in a university. That's the best kind of community you'll ever have. So yeah,
and
work, collaborate with people.
yeah, some amazing opportunities to collaborate. Um, and okay, so we actually have a number of additional questions. So I'll try to make sure we get to that. Teresa Becker noted that we're being American, we understand about kind of it, in the people in the U.S. There's often this kind of so many Americans don't even bother to notice that there is a rest of the world most of the time. And on that topic, she had a question earlier and said, Jack, in the U.S., there's something of an educational emphasis, downplaying the value of liberal arts education and focusing on technical skill. Uh, Hold on, I lost my. Yes. Technical skill or field is considered to be valuable. Considering your background in English Lit and philosophy, can you speak to the role that background plays in how you generate ideas or your own creativity?
Oops,
Is there a?
something just happened there. Hello.
Can you still hear me?
Um, yep. I heard a shouting voice though.
Yeah,
Um,
I think someone's mic wasn't muted and someone was trying to ask them a question or something. So basically,
ah,
Teresa's question is about how your background in literature and philosophy has, kind of led you to create games, and how it informs your games, uh, especially as compared to an idea that educationally, that technical skills are what matter and that the humanities are a tangent.
Well, I think they're they're two different ends, aren't they?
Okay, that makes sense.
Technical skills are definitely invaluable for certain, but I personally believe that more arts, literature, the humanities um, lead to uh, instead of the goal being fun, the goal is meaning. I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
Okay.
two questions get thrown a lot in games, which people find intolerable. Are, well, is it a game? And, and the second is, well, is it art? And if we kind of dissect these questions, you know, the thing, what it boils down, is it fun and is it meaningful? Now, I'm not very interested in the question, is it fun? Um, but I am deeply interested in, does it have meaning? Now, a technical background doesn't tell you whether something has meaning as much as a background in the humanities can tell you if something has meaning. But that is just my point of view. Yeah, that's
Right.
my point of view. It's a good point of view.
Well,
I'm not gonna use that.
I mean, my own background is humanities, and that's, as you demonstrate with your own work. One of the things I think that uh, education does is it helps give us some of the foundations to keep learning, as opposed to determining the scope of what we will ever learn or know about. And so it is possible to start from an education, for example, that is focused on computer science, and get around to literature and philosophy, just as possible to have an education where you start with literature and philosophy and get around to the use of game design tools. Um, but there's I think you've got a point about the depth of engagement with
And I'm also not. I'm saying that the games need to be meaningful. I
right.
mean, there's enough. There's art galleries if you want meaning. I mean, perhaps you don't want games to be meaningful, so that's totally fine. And
Well, and
uh,
go ahead.
I'm not. Yeah, I think it's the one thing which I've noticed is that my favorite kind of developers and their works often come from a background which isn't exclusively computer science. It's often
Right.
from a maths background or a science background or an arts background, or no academic background at all. Um, but then again, some of the most mechanically uh, engaging and fantastic games come definitely from the world of computer science. It's just
Well, I think there's
just
a real value, some cross pollination of ideas, whether it's in terms of where you start from with your academic work, or whether it's in terms of what you kind of seek out, and who you deal with. That's that you get some new things out of combining different perspectives. I mean, I know that I sometimes, I wouldn't say that all games have to be deeply meaningful, but I sometimes more often see the opposite, and that is the idea that games exist only to be fun, even as some of those people who want to say that games exist only to be fun also think that games are or can be art, whatever art means. Um, Getting back to questions, though, Sean Ferris has a good one. Um, he asks, have you considered playing with some imagery similar to Alex Gray, who has had a lot of influence on Tool's work, as his imagery somewhat transcends the concept of religion to a more universality of the human experience? So there's some philosophy in there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually not very keen on that style of
Okay.
op art, kind of Bridget Riley sort of thing. So basically not. I also feel that his kind of approach to kind of faith and religion is a bit too hippy dippy for my liking. It's a bit too kind of soul is eternal and leaves there. I can't be bothered with it. It's a bit. If you've heard of, have you heard of the, well, for lack of a better term, philosopher Rudolf Steiner?
Hmm.
Um, well, it's a bit too Rudolf Steiner for my liking.
That I follow
Um,
that. That may be another link I may need to post with this in terms of helping people who are not familiar, for example, with Steiner, understand what that means. Uh, I do feel sometimes there's a danger in trying to bring people together of simplifying out the texture of what makes any of the specific things people believe in value important. But I'm not sure if that's even where you were going with that.
I'm not sure if it was. uh,
Well, let's go on the
well,
next. Let's go on the next question then, because we've actually.
God, it's such a shame that I can't have conversations with people. I've just realised, gosh, I would love to talk to um, Stuart about. God, this is such a nice opportunity. Yeah. Anyway, okay. So, yeah, over to
Um,
you.
okay, so um, this is from Teresa again. Teresa is also an instructor here at Full Sail. Um, And just a connection, Jack, Sean is completing his master's in mobile gaming with us and is finishing his capstone game. He was also playing around with developing a female character who breaks norms. He also has a fine arts background, so you have that in common. Upon graduation, you'll have 2 levels, so we'd like to get some momentum to finish the full game. Do you have any pointers on how, as an indie developer, you're able to start getting funding? How difficult was it? Any tips? So,
Um,
crowdfunding
I'm not.
and promotions, it's
I
not
think.
easy.
I think the state of funding differs from country to country, but in arts funding in Scotland is uh, comes from taxpayers' money, uh, and game funding doesn't go to solo devs. It goes to teams who are already financially viable. So for me, there's very little opportunity for funding. Well, even with arts funding, it's moving in a kind of better way, but it's done in a way where if you get funding, it means that another project doesn't.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm kind of lumped in the same group as youth theatre, as um, arts in the community, and I just I
Well,
think all of that is far more valuable than any of my games. But in terms of crowdfunding, I can definitely I definitely would uh, I would I mean it just allows for interesting games to get made actually. I mean I was listing a few of them on Twitter and
hmm.
just some of the most fantastic games. Recently, Undertale, Dragon Cancer, Sunless
Right.
Sea,
Yes.
all of
Oh, you
these,
just hit three of my
um,
favorites right there. So,
just all of these, yeah, exactly. Some of your favorites, some of the most interesting alternative. Not, it doesn't even matter that they're all alternative. They're just interesting works,
hmm.
made possible by crowdfunding. Um, so yeah, when it comes to tips, perhaps just give my email address and I can send some, invaluable resources in terms of making. For games, you need to have gifts. People just love gifts. You need to really kind of yeah. I mean, I don't. I'm not even sure if I'm going to make my goal with Dujanah. So I
Well,
might
I
not be
certainly
the
hope you
best
do,
person.
but it is, it's always hard. It's something I've heard from everyone who I've talked to about successfully kickstarting stuff is that it's a lot of work with a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah, I mean, there's this horrible thing that you write a lot of emails and they just disappear. You don't get a reply, and you know. But I've had some nice replies today. I mean, this is wonderful. So I mean, might not be the best. This is nice. This is all because of this. IGN
Hmm.
just put up an article about Dujanah, so that's pretty much the biggest press I've ever had. Um, I've not read it yet, um, so yeah, just don't be afraid to um, issue another email. Don't if they don't reply the first time, send one another a week later. The best thing is to personalize things. Find the writers who are might be interested in your games. If you're making a mobile game, don't write to Jason Shearer of Kotaku because Kotaku don't cover crowdfunding, and he's into you know mobiles. So it's the wrong person. Find Pocket Gamer, write to them. If you've got a PC distribution, write to Rock Paper Shotgun. Pretty much the most interesting site for games.
Yeah,
And you,
I do love RPS. I do love RPS. I'm actually I've just pulled up a website called Clickist. I don't even know how big this site is yet, but I recently discovered it because it is specifically a news site for crowdfunded gaming. And so I've added that to all my feed, collection of feeds because it's a good way to keep track of new games projects on Kickstarter. Um,
yeah, yeah, and I mean you have to make people understand that you can make what you profess
well,
to to be selling.
and I think that you said on your blog that Dujanah was about 2/3 complete when you went to Kickstarter, right? Somewhere around there, certainly more than half complete.
Yeah, definitely more than half complete. The all the technical side of things is complete, and I've got to a stage where I'm confident. I mean, it's not the art, the visual side of things will
Mhm.
be, it's 8 months away from being finished, so there's going to be a lot more added visually, but
Right.
um, I'm confident with how the game is going to look. With Beeswing, it actually ended up looking quite different to how it started off looking.
Okay.
Um, I mean, it started with this kind of grid-based movement. Now it's not grid-based; it's eight direction. So yeah, but it sounds like Sean, I think, is quite far along, and yeah, be modest with your goals as well. I mean, I I I don't really monetary gain temptation has never really been a thing for me. As long as I can get by and be able to have a nice soup with my partner, then I'm okay. So
I
that's
do
about it.
remember once a an indie game dev who I knew recommending moving either to somewhere in Europe or to basically South America. Basically, what he said was that if you really want to do um, indie games, it helps to be living somewhere that has a lower cost of living in the United States or a stronger kind of the social security net. Um, that Sean, that's not to reiterate the comment in the chat that maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't move to Scotland, but ooh, and here's another interesting comment um, from Martha Feldman. she says, we recently, as part of our class, watched a talk by I don't know how to pronounce Chede's first name. Is it Chimamanda Chede? That might be completely wrong. But called The Danger of a Single Story. I wish everyone in the world could watch it. My readings from the comments and review of Dujanah on IGN. It seems you've got your world cut out to change the view of people, specifically in terms of religion. Would you be telling... would you just be telling the story, or do you want to change the views of people? So there's, the... I don't need to go look at those comments to see that I'm sure they're...
I can guess that I'm either a anti-Muslim bigot or I'm a pro-extremist. And I don't even need to read them. I can't wait to read this IGN article. But yeah, I don't think I'm out to change anyone's beliefs, let alone point of view. I think there's one or two things which I'm quite interested in, which might be veering towards that way. So one thing is two things. Let's talk about torture on one hand.
Mm-hmm.
So torture is commonly used by the military and by police force, and now torture it can go from anything to sleep deprivation to violent, breaking people's bones. It can go from any of these things, and I think there's interesting questions there. If you take the kind of the tram moral philosophy idea, there's a tram hurtling down the line,
Mm-hmm.
and you can the streetcar, I think it's called. You can pull a lever and it will hit one guy, but the people in the tram will be okay. Or you can not pull the lever and the tram will crash and everyone will die. I mean, most people say, okay, I would pull the lever. One life weighed against, a tram full of 20 odd lives. You've got this moral question. But then you can take that further, okay? So the tram will stop if you push the person in front of the tram.
Right.
Would you push the person? And then it becomes difficult. But then the real situation which people are facing is, would you torture someone to get information which will save 5 people? That will save one person, and it becomes very, very difficult. But I think if I am to have any line on this kind of difficult topic, I think nothing's finalized. But the line which I might be pushing is, which I potentially could be pushing, is no. You wouldn't torture because you want to show that you have principles. And I think that might be a line. Okay, so that's one aspect. I don't think that's particularly changing, pushing to change beliefs or anything like this. And I think it's more open to asking questions and to provoking debate than to changing beliefs. And another aspect is, well, it comes from my practices as in Buddhist and Mahayana Buddhism, is this idea of free will, which I think has become, which seems very detrimental, especially in North America, where it's even part of your legislation. And a throwaway little idea is you don't have free will because you don't choose the choices which are given to you. You don't choose whether to have wine or beer with your dinner because yeah, they're the only options. You don't get to choose banana juice. So an
Right.
aspect of that is in the game where you talk to someone and they'll say something like, "Do you believe in free will?" And you'll have a choice, both of which saying yes. Um, so, uh, so there's tiny. I have to say, if I'm going to be honest, there are tiny little pushes in in a certain direction. But it's not a game about, it's not an appraisal of any faith. It isn't a critique of uh, of any faith. Um, and the reason it's not an appraisal or a critique of any faith is because I think there's more interesting things to do. I frankly think that's
Right.
a bit of a boring thing to do. Um, anyway,
And well, I think getting back to to the question, to Martha's question, uh, in many ways, what you're saying is that your aim isn't didactic. You're not setting out to teach people a specific point or to make them think a certain way, but is to tell a story that happens to be the story that you know you think is interesting or meaningful, or that and which is very different from that may have an influence on what people think, but that's different from setting out to change what people think. Which for me, as a writer, setting out to change what people think is at best a difficult and at worst a self-defeating undertaking.
mm.
Um, I know that
Well,
regardless of
yeah,
what
well,
I think about the point, when someone is trying to hammer a point home, I close up. I become resistant. It's like,
exactly. And another point is whether it's didactic or not is that you don't get a choice. I mean, uh, one thing as a creator is you've only made the piece. You don't. You're not playing it.
right.
Authorship of something is that's all it is. You don't get to determine the piece's meaning as well. I mean, you might have your own thoughts. I have my own thoughts that the game is about, uh, subversions of the hero narrative.
Hmm.
But I also thought Beeswing, it was about the line between tackiness and sincerity. But no one got that meaning from the game.
Yes. Well, once you create something and you put it out there, you don't get to decide what other people think of it.
I mean, and on the other side, Ridley Scott didn't realize that Alien was about the fear of childbirth
Right.
when it's such an obvious reading of his film.
Well,
So I
yeah,
mean,
it's so obvious that that's part of what the film means, but Ridley Scott didn't have to. Um, this is, I mean, right there. That's part of one of the insights I think of the humanities is that what a work means is an individual thing that is uh, where neither the creator nor any one person's understanding of it is the determination of what the work means.
mm,
Um,
yeah.
and so you don't get to decide what your work will mean to other people.
And one thing is, oh yeah, okay. I think that's that.
But
These are
Alexis actually,
fantastic questions.
well, I think we've pretty much we've more or less cut up. They're kind of a let's see. Alexis said about I need to watch that video again so I can get her name, the author's name right. About Shimamanda's TED Talk. That she's so right to agree with that talk. It's very informative and educational for those who adhere to the single story uh, to the single story and don't see beyond it. Basically, like where for a that that's about the idea that it's really important not to associate any particular person or group of people, whether it's ethnicity, whether it's creed, or for that matter, whether it's other cultural factors, with one particular role or one particular story. And that relates to what you said about, challenging the hero narrative. I couldn't help but notice that, there's in the embedded kind of Metroidvania game, there's jumping and shooting and things to beat, which is very different from what I see going on in the screenshots of Dujanah, where we're not playing the game in the arcade, which I don't know if we want to be too leading there. Also, apparently there was hold on, I'll check for, apparently before Scott left, he had a specific question. I must have missed it, or a request. Oh, right. Scott Wakefield had said, if you get a chance, I'd love to hear about the story writing process. Scott is a creative writing student. So,
Okay.
what kind of, what's your process? Not necessarily for any, either generally or for any specific game as an example.
So it's notebooks, notebooks and notebooks. And I find different sizes of notebooks as well. So I'm just looking for I've got this tiny, tiny, tiny one, which is smaller than a credit card. And in that, I have just little ideas. So, man videoing desert, just little scribbles of ideas.
So you jot them down as you have them, then, to avoid losing them?
Yeah, I mean, jot them down as I have them, and yeah, that's about it. And then, because of my practice, the image making takes quite some time. So I have actually a really nice kind of routine at the moment where when I'm making the images, this is when I think about the story. I can really meditate on each of the individual characters. So you might see on the web page there's a band, and I wanted so one of my
yes, the band.
Really seminal moment in my life, besides Adam Jones' Tool videos, is I became obsessed with this Iranian theatre group called Theatre Bazi, who I managed to see a couple of times. And it was just fascinating that they loved this kind of alternative rock music. Just this weird alternative rock. I mean, they were pretty out there kind of people. So I had this kind of story arc of, well, not even a story arc, just this kind of club where you'll go in and there's different bands playing different characters. So I wanted a kind of post-punk group in the kind of vein of Theatre Bazi. And when making them, the kind of meditation on it, the meditative thing of taking them, you take it frame by frame. They're about 20 odd frames each, so it really takes some time, especially when there's multiple different characters. And I thought, well, what's a efficient way to do this? And so they have these yellow heads, which are just kind of blobs, taken after the kind of David Lynch visual art thing of blobs for heads. And then, well, it's yellow, so let's make them kind of emoticon expressions. We have a smiling guy, a winking guy, and a surprised guy. And then, just kind of letting the ideas ferment. Just allowing them to kind of naturally grow is somehow where, yeah, where the stories come from. And another aspect is using real life accounts, interviews with interesting people in the community, things like this, and then everything in between as well. So you have these. Yeah, it's hard to say where an idea comes from. Really, when I'm talking, I'm
Right.
honestly probably being dishonest saying that the idea comes from any single place, because it really is an amalgam of different things. It's almost like a synthesis. It's really, but I guess I would just encourage the process, and if you kind of donate time to the process of writing or the process of creation of making, the process of making, then just allow that process to happen, and it just does. It's magic. You just be creative. It's wonderful. Anyway,
Right.
that's not very good. Yeah, okay. So
Well,
notebooks,
Teresa
notebooks,
described that as emergent behavior. Sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Jack.
notebooks are a must for writing. Sketch down every idea. Maybe the idea doesn't work, but you see it's on the same page as another idea, and you realize that next to each other you've got an even bigger idea. So
Right.
and notebooks which aren't on the screen, you know, take pen and paper. That's why I say to writers, but they know this. Of course, they know this.
Well, but there are all kinds of different approaches, so it's good. And Teresa asked if it'd be all right if I shared your email contact. It occurs to me actually, Jack, that I think I just have your your Twitter. We've talked mostly via Twitter. I'm not going to ask you to to tell us your email right now, because this archive, I don't know who's going to be viewing it. But if you could send me an email that I can pass address, like use Twitter to Twitter private message to send me an email address that I can give to people like Sean, that'd be great.
No problem. Yeah. I'll just quickly do that now before I forget. I mean, it's on my website as well. If
Oh, okay, it
you,
is. Okay.
I mean, that's probably something for game developers. Have make people be able to reach you. Have your email address on on the front page of your website. Have it,
Mm-hmm.
especially for indie people. Just have it there. So yeah. Um, of course, anyone can email me questions. I'm just, I'm sure not. I try my best to help. Okay.
So we're probably about ready to wrap up. I mean, we've been going for a solid hour and a half now. I gave us some extra buffer time. Um, I do want to give anyone who might have a question they haven't asked yet a last chance to to ask. Let's see. What are the things that I was going to? I seem to distinctly recall that there were other things I was going to ask you about, but they have escaped my mind. Jack, is there anything you kind of wanted to mention or have that's kind of come to
I just have to say thanks so much for this opportunity. I hope I've not been too much of a pain in the ear.
Not at all.
Um, yeah, I would encourage everyone to have a look at my Kickstarter and share it with their friends if they would be so kind. I, I, I
Please
mean,
do,
that's a
folks.
horrible thing. That's a horrible thing to ask.
No, no,
But
no. It is the minimum, the absolute minimum that anyone should request when they are trying to promote something and they agree to do some sort of talk. This is why, you know, uh, public
I
figures who have a book out go on all kinds of different talk shows. They're promoting their book. It is, I hate marketing myself, so I totally understand where you're coming from, Jack. I hate it, but you have to do it.
a real difference between North American culture and Scottish culture. That it, um, I don't know, it just sounds better in an American accent, you know. Uh, this kind of confidence and bombast and this,
Well,
confidence. It doesn't come naturally to me.
I,
I'm
it
quite
actually
an
reminds
introvert.
me a lot of, again, because the United States is um, only gives the appearance of having a singular, coherent culture in its own media. It really
Yeah,
is a very diverse and fractured place, and
yeah,
um,
yeah.
what you're saying reminds me a lot of the kind of Midwestern reserve that I see. Uh, I know a lot of people who are from the Midwest, and it's like, you don't brag about yourself. You go back to my grandparents' generation. We go back to my grandparents' generation, they were all living in the Midwest, and I kind of got enough of that myself just by contact that that I hate promoting my own work. I can't stand it, but
I think it's
I have learned
a
that you have
really
to do it.
interesting, a really interesting place where you can really see the cultural difference.
Hmm.
Uh, is is talk shows and
Okay.
things like is Jerry Springer or Ricky Lake. And Ricky
Please
Lake and
don't
Jerry
take those as the
Springer.
mainstream of what Americans are like.
Oh no, 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 of course not. But
But yes.
it works so well in an American accent. But when you see it in a Scottish accent, it is the most cripplingly embarrassing thing you can ever imagine. It just doesn't work so well. Of course, you've got 10 times the amount of people in
Well,
each state in
and
Scotland. But anyway,
it's that I think there's also something
sentimental.
there of what it looks like and feels like from the outside.
And
I,
yeah, of
I
course,
mean,
of
you have
course.
to understand that the typical American view of what it means to be Scottish um, is basically Braveheart and Sean Connery. That's basically
uh,
the middle American view of what Scotland is.
we've done well. Well, Shrek's accent.
Right, right. And of course, some of us have seen Train Spotting, which is a completely different perspective on Scotland. But
Uh, that's where I live. That's my that's my street. In fact,
oh
I'm
wow,
in Leith in Edinburgh. Um, yeah, it's quite a tough place. It's a lot better than it was when I was 16, but yeah. So I think that's more. Yeah, neither of them are true to life. Okay, sorry for going on such a tangent at the end there. Also, you must tell your students that feel free to contact me if they have any further questions or if they have any kind of relevant perspectives on any of the themes which I'm talking about, which they would like to have a chat, or even if they have concerns with any of my work, then please don't hesitate to point them in my direction. And yeah, okay.
well, you heard him, everybody. I will make sure that I include Jack's email with the official kind of like, hey, the archive is up, and if you have more questions for Jack, you can ask. Thank you very much, Jack. It's
Thank you, Tom.
This has been great. So I think we're going to go ahead. I'm going to stop recording now, and we'll wrap up this session. It's been Jack King
Oh, look, I
Spooner.
can see the chat. All
What?
right. Oh, look, I can see the chat. I didn't realize that.
Oh.
Okay. Okay, that's a bit late now. Anyway, I gotta go. Okay.
So I'm going to stop recording, and this has been Jack King Spooner here chatting with me. Jack's game Dujanah is currently in Kickstarter, and I wish him the best hitting his goal in the next little over 2 weeks. Right, you got about a little over 2 weeks left.
Yeah, about 16 days, yeah.
So
Okay, so keep well. Thanks very much.
thank you.